The restaurant always felt like a world of its own, filled with soft chatter, clinking glasses, and the warm glow of evening lights. People came here to relax after long days, celebrate moments, or simply find comfort in a good meal. Yet, in the middle of all of this, the waiter moved quietly from table to table, almost invisible to the people he served. He wasn't the kind of person who tried to stand out. He kept his voice gentle, his steps light, and his presence calm. Most guests barely remembered his face, but they always remembered his kindness. He never rushed anyone, never seemed annoyed, and always carried a steady patience that made people feel at ease. Those who worked with him noticed how he avoided the spotlight. When the staff joked around, he smiled but didn't talk much. When others stayed after hours to chat, he cleaned his station and left without drawing attention. Some thought he was simply shy, while others guessed he might be dealing with something personal. No one pushed him to share more. They respected the quiet way he lived his life. Still, beneath that quietness, there was something different about him. A kind of depth in his eyes, as if he had stories he kept locked away. Sometimes, during slow afternoons, he would stand near the corner where the old piano sat. The restaurant kept it mostly for decoration, though a pianist came on weekends to play soft tunes for guests. The waiter never touched the piano, but whenever he passed by, he paused for half a second, like someone greeting a long-lost friend from a distance. One of the regular customers noticed this. He was a wealthy man, known for his sharp eyes and even sharper instincts. He visited the restaurant often, usually sitting at the same corner table. He enjoyed watching people, especially those who didn't seem to notice him watching. And over time, he began paying attention to the waiter's strange, quiet relationship with the piano. The wealthy customer couldn't help but wonder why a simple waiter looked at the instrument with such familiarity. It wasn't curiosity in his eyes. It wasn't longing. It was something deeper, almost like recognition, as if the piano had once been a part of his life. The customer didn't know the waiter personally, but he sensed there was more to the story, and the more he observed, the more curious he became. One evening, just before the dinner rush, the staff gathered near the counter to talk about the upcoming weekend. The pianist had mentioned he might not be available, which left the manager worried. The restaurant wasn't used to quiet weekends. Music added warmth, and the lack of it could make the atmosphere feel incomplete. The waiter listened silently as the staff discussed options. Someone joked that maybe he could play since he seemed to like the piano so much. Everyone laughed lightly, assuming it was just a harmless comment. The waiter's reaction, however, was not what they expected. His face tightened for a moment, and he quickly turned away, pretending to wipe a counter. No one pressed the topic, but the wealthy customer sitting across the room noticed the discomfort immediately. Later that night, after most guests had left, the millionaire approached the counter and struck up a casual conversation with the manager. He asked about the piano, the missing musician, and whether anyone else could step in. The manager shook their head and explained the situation, laughing that the only person who even looked at the piano was the quiet waiter. The millionaire raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" he asked casually, though inside, his curiosity grew even stronger. Over the next few days, the customer observed the waiter more closely. He watched the way the waiter moved with practiced grace, how his hands were steady yet delicate, how he remained composed under pressure. There was a certain elegance in the way he carried himself, something you didn't see in someone who had lived a simple life. He had the hands of someone who used to create something rather than someone who served plates. On a slow afternoon, the waiter stood near the piano again. He didn't touch it. He simply stared at it for a quiet moment, then walked away as if reminding himself to stay distant. The millionaire watched from his table, narrowing his eyes thoughtfully. He wondered what had happened in the waiter's past. Why did he avoid the piano? What had pushed him from whatever life he lived before into this quiet existence as a waiter? And most importantly, was he avoiding it because it reminded him of something painful, or because he feared what would happen if he returned to it? The millionaire didn't have answers yet, but he was certain of one thing. This waiter was not ordinary. One night, when the restaurant was busier than usual, a small incident happened that revealed even more. A child from a table nearby wandered toward the piano and pressed a few keys, producing scattered sounds. The manager quickly rushed over, politely guiding the child away. But before that, for a brief moment, the waiter had watched the child with an expression that was impossible to miss. It was a look of longing, pure and unmistakable. The millionaire saw it clearly. That one expression told him everything he needed to know. Whatever connection the waiter had with music, it ran deep. So deep that even a child tapping the keys could stir emotions he tried so hard to bury. After closing time, when the last guest walked out and the lights dimmed, the waiter stayed behind a few extra minutes. He stood near the piano again. The restaurant was quiet, and for a moment, he reached out his hand, barely touching the edge of the instrument. His fingers trembled slightly as they hovered above the keys. But he didn't play. He pulled his hand back quickly, as if afraid of what the sound might awaken inside him. And then he turned away. The millionaire watched from the doorway, unnoticed. At that moment, the wealthy customer understood one thing clearly. This wasn't just a random skill hidden by a shy waiter. This was a talent that had been abandoned. A gift that once meant something, maybe everything, to the person now serving tables. The millionaire didn't know why the waiter had stopped playing, but he felt certain the story behind it was heavy. Over the next few days, the millionaire formed a plan. A bold one. One that would eventually force the waiter to confront the very thing he was running from. He wasn't sure how the waiter would react. Maybe he would get angry. Maybe he would refuse. Or maybe, just maybe, he would rediscover what he had buried for so long. Whatever the outcome, the millionaire knew that this quiet, polite waiter deserved a moment of truth. A moment to show the world and himself what he was capable of. And so, without telling anyone, the millionaire decided that the opportunity would come soon. Very soon. The restaurant was bustling on that special evening. The air was filled with the chatter of guests, the clinking of cutlery, and the soft hum of background music. The piano in the corner, usually played by a talented musician, was silent that night. The pianist had called in sick at the last minute, leaving the restaurant manager scrambling to find a solution. The regular staff tried to keep everything running smoothly, but there was a noticeable tension in the air. Music had always been part of the restaurant's charm, and its absence created an unusual emptiness. The wealthy customer who often observed the quiet waiter was present, along with a few friends visiting for a private celebration. They had arrived early to enjoy the atmosphere and had noticed immediately that something was missing. The pianist's absence created an awkward hush in the usually lively space. Conversations felt incomplete, and the guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, glancing at the empty piano. The manager whispered to the staff, trying to figure out what to do. Some suggested hiring a last-minute musician from nearby, but everyone knew it would not be the same. Then, a light-hearted joke passed among the staff, hinting that maybe the quiet waiter could fill in. The suggestion was met with laughter. No one seriously expected him to play, and the waiter, overhearing it, tensed visibly and looked away. He continued serving, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. The wealthy customer noticed immediately. He had been watching the waiter for weeks, and this small reaction spoke volumes. The waiter's sudden stiffness suggested there was a deep connection to the piano, one that stirred both fear and longing within him. The millionaire's curiosity grew stronger. He realized that this man had a story hidden behind the calm exterior. As the evening continued, the guests became restless. The absence of music was evident, and the millionaire could no longer resist. He leaned slightly toward the manager and whispered, "Why doesn't he play? I have a feeling he can." The manager shrugged, unsure of the claim, and explained that the waiter was shy and private. "He's polite and talented in his work, but I don't think he has played in years," the manager said quietly. The millionaire's eyes flickered with interest. He decided that the moment had come to test his theory. He watched the waiter carry plates and pour drinks, moving with the same quiet grace he had always observed. There was a rhythm to his movements, a precision that hinted at practice, discipline, and perhaps even artistry. The way the waiter held himself, the calm steadiness of his hands, all pointed to a skill that went far beyond waiting tables. With a small nod to his friends, the millionaire approached the waiter, who was arranging cutlery at one of the tables. The waiter noticed him and offered a polite smile, ready to continue his work, unaware of the encounter that was about to unfold. "I hear you might be able to play the piano," the millionaire said casually, leaning slightly on the back of a chair. The waiter stiffened. For a moment, he didn't respond. His fingers twitched slightly as if recalling something buried deep within him. "It's been years," he finally murmured. His voice was soft, almost hesitant. The millionaire smiled gently but pressed on. "I think tonight is the perfect night. Why don't you give it a try?" The waiter shook his head, a mixture of fear and embarrassment crossing his face. He muttered something about not being ready, about leaving music behind, and the discomfort of performing in front of strangers. The millionaire could see the internal struggle. He wasn't being cruel. He wanted the waiter to see what everyone else had begun to notice, that there was something extraordinary about him that couldn't stay hidden forever. The millionaire's tone was firm, yet encouraging, almost like a mentor urging a hesitant student. He wanted the waiter to confront the part of himself he had kept locked away for years. The guests began to notice the interaction. Whispers passed through the room as people wondered why this quiet waiter, usually so composed, seemed suddenly nervous. The millionaire gestured subtly toward the piano, indicating that this was his moment. The waiter hesitated, glancing around at the curious faces, feeling the weight of attention pressing down on him. For a few tense seconds, it seemed as if he might refuse entirely. His hands trembled slightly, betraying the depth of emotion he was trying to hide. Memories flooded his mind. The joy of music, the thrill of creating sound, the heartbreak of walking away from something he loved, the missed opportunities, the sacrifices. All of it seemed to converge in that small corner of the restaurant, holding him captive. Finally, with a deep breath, the waiter walked toward the piano. Each step was measured, cautious, as if crossing an invisible line into a world he had left behind. The millionaire stepped back, watching intently but giving him the space to reclaim a piece of himself. When the waiter reached the piano, he paused, his fingers hovering over the keys. He looked around the room, seeing the expectant eyes of the guests, the gentle encouragement of the millionaire, and the supportive glances from the staff. A sense of fear mixed with excitement filled him. For years, he had avoided this very moment. Yet here it was, unavoidable and compelling. With a tentative touch, he pressed the first key. The sound echoed softly across the room. It was simple, hesitant, yet beautiful in its imperfection. A small smile appeared on his face, a flicker of recognition, a spark of something he had nearly forgotten. The guests leaned forward, drawn in by the unexpected moment, sensing that they were about to witness something remarkable. Encouraged by the small sound, he pressed another key, then another, gaining confidence with each note. The tension in his body began to ease, replaced by a growing rhythm and flow. The music filled the room, weaving through the conversations, softening the clinking of glasses, and commanding attention. Guests paused mid-sentence, captivated by the sudden brilliance emerging from someone they had never expected. The millionaire smiled, knowing he had made the right decision. He had pushed gently, not forcefully, and it had worked. The waiter was reclaiming a part of himself, piece by piece, note by note. This was not just a performance. It was a resurrection of something vital, something that had been waiting patiently for the right moment. As the music continued, the waiter's hands moved with growing confidence. The initial hesitation vanished, replaced by a smooth, flowing mastery. Memories of long nights spent practicing, of lessons learned and mistakes made, guided his fingers effortlessly across the keys. The room, once filled with tension, was now alive with music that spoke to every listener. Guests exchanged amazed glances. The waiter, who had once been invisible, was now the center of attention. Yet he didn't play for recognition. He played for himself, for the joy that had always been a part of him, for the part of his soul that had been waiting to be heard. The millionaire leaned back in his chair, satisfied. He had glimpsed something extraordinary, hidden behind quiet service and modest demeanor. The waiter's performance, hesitant at first and then increasingly confident, revealed a talent that no one had anticipated. It was a moment of revelation, not just for the guests, but for the waiter himself. By the time he finished, the room erupted into applause. The waiter's heart raced, not from fear, but from exhilaration. He had faced the challenge he had feared for so long and discovered that his talent had not left him. The piano, once a source of avoidance and apprehension, had become a bridge back to something he had lost. The millionaire approached him quietly, offering a few sincere words of praise. "That was incredible," he said. "I knew you could do it." The waiter nodded, a mixture of relief, pride, and gratitude washing over him. He realized that sometimes, life pushes us toward moments we dread, only to reveal the strength and beauty we never knew we still had. That night, the waiter returned to his station, but everything had changed. Guests continued to talk about the unexpected performance, but the true transformation had occurred within him. He had faced the fear of exposure and discovered that the world was not as frightening as he had imagined. There was acceptance, admiration, and even opportunity waiting, just beyond the moment of courage he had claimed. The night after the unexpected push from the millionaire, the waiter could not sleep. His thoughts were tangled, running in circles between fear, regret, and excitement. He replayed the moment over and over in his mind, the hesitant touch of the keys, the trembling start, and then the gradual flow of music. He realized that something he had kept buried for years was still alive, quietly waiting for him to notice. The memory of the applause still echoed in his ears. Guests had clapped, cheered, and even a few had stood up to acknowledge his talent. It was a feeling he had almost forgotten: validation, not just from others but from himself. He had played and it had been good. No, it had been more than good, it had been real. He had felt every note resonate through his body, reconnecting him with a part of himself that he thought he had lost forever. Morning arrived, and with it the familiar rhythm of the restaurant. Yet everything felt different. He moved through the tasks mechanically at first, washing dishes, arranging tables, and taking orders, but his mind kept drifting back to the piano. Each time he passed the corner where it sat, he felt an almost magnetic pull. The sight of the polished black wood, the gentle curve of the keys, the small stool that had supported countless songs over the years. All of it spoke to him in a language he had almost forgotten. The millionaire arrived again, early as usual, and noticed the waiter moving with a distracted energy. He approached the counter with a calm, knowing smile. "How are you feeling today?" he asked. The waiter hesitated, unsure how to answer. Finally, he murmured, "I don't know. Strange, I guess. I can't stop thinking about it. About last night." The millionaire nodded, as if he had expected this. "You played beautifully. I think it is time to face why you stopped. Maybe it is time to remember why music mattered to you in the first place." The waiter avoided eye contact, his fingers fidgeting nervously. He had spent years avoiding this question. Music had once been his life, but something had made him walk away. It was a past full of struggles, financial difficulties, personal disappointment, and missed opportunities. Every note he had once played had carried the weight of both joy and pain. He had left the piano to escape the memories, to live a simpler, safer life. But he now realized that running had not erased the past. It had only hidden it. When the restaurant was slower that afternoon, the millionaire gently approached him again, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I know it is hard," he said softly. "I know it is scary, but you cannot hide forever. Your talent deserves to be seen." The waiter's eyes met his, and for the first time, he allowed himself to consider the possibility that maybe it was true. Maybe hiding had not been protecting him. Maybe it had been limiting him. He could feel the old fear creeping up, but there was also a spark of excitement. The piano was calling him back, and for the first time in years he felt ready to listen. He walked over to the piano, his movements slow and hesitant. His hands hovered above the keys, trembling slightly. Memories of past performances, of long hours spent practicing, of moments of triumph and failure, all rushed through him. He remembered the feeling of losing himself in the music, of letting his emotions pour through every note. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. With a deep breath, he pressed a key. The sound rang out, clear and soft, filling the quiet restaurant. It was a tentative start, almost a whisper, but it was enough to remind him that he still had the skill. Encouraged, he tried another note, then another. The melody began to form slowly, carefully, each note building upon the last. The flow of music returned to him naturally, as if no time had passed at all. Guests who were still lingering in the restaurant noticed the sound and paused. Conversations slowed, heads turned, and eyes were drawn to the corner where the waiter stood. He did not notice them. He was lost in the music, in the feelings that had once defined him. The piano had become a bridge, connecting him to a part of himself he had almost forgotten. The millionaire watched from a distance, careful not to intrude. He could see the conflict in the waiter's expression, the fear, the vulnerability, and the tentative joy. The man was rediscovering something fundamental, something that had always been a part of him but had been suppressed by life's circumstances. Every note was a step toward reclaiming his identity, every chord a reminder of the talent and passion he had almost abandoned. As the performance continued, the waiter's confidence grew. He began to play more boldly, allowing his fingers to move freely across the keys. The hesitancy of the first notes disappeared, replaced by a flowing, expressive style. The music filled the restaurant, wrapping around the guests, drawing them in. They felt the emotion in every note, the story behind the performance, even without knowing the details of his past. The waiter's hands moved with precision and grace, each note reflecting both skill and feeling. He realized that he was no longer just playing, he was communicating. The music told a story of struggle, resilience, and rediscovery. It was deeply personal, yet universally moving. For the first time in a long time, he felt truly alive. The guests were captivated. Some whispered to each other in awe, unable to believe that the quiet waiter who had seemed so ordinary could produce something so extraordinary. Others simply sat in silence, letting the music wash over them. The atmosphere in the restaurant had transformed completely. What had been a simple dining experience had become an intimate concert, a moment of unexpected beauty. The waiter's mind was focused entirely on the music. He was aware of the audience, but their presence no longer intimidated him. Instead, it inspired him. He realized that performing was not about proving anything to others. It was about expressing himself, about letting the music carry his emotions and thoughts in a way words never could. He felt a sense of freedom he had not known in years, a liberation that came from embracing the very thing he had tried to escape. When the piece came to an end, the restaurant erupted in applause. The waiter's heart raced, but it was not from fear. It was from joy, satisfaction, and a sense of accomplishment. He had faced his hesitation, overcome his fear, and allowed himself to play again. The experience was both humbling and empowering. He realized that the challenge the millionaire had given him was not just about performing in front of others. It was about reconnecting with his own life, reclaiming a piece of himself that had been lost. The millionaire approached him once more, offering a few words of encouragement. "You did it. That was beautiful. You see what you are capable of, don't you?" The waiter nodded, feeling a mixture of relief, pride, and gratitude. He understood now that the music had always been a part of him, waiting for the right moment to resurface. He had faced his fear and come out stronger on the other side. The rest of the evening passed with a sense of quiet satisfaction. The waiter returned to his regular duties, but there was a new energy about him. He moved with a lighter step, a small smile playing on his lips. He knew that his life had shifted, that he had taken the first step toward something greater, and that the piano would always be there, a constant reminder of his talent and resilience. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of hope. The fear that had held him back was still there, but it had been replaced by determination. He had accepted the challenge, and in doing so, he had rediscovered a vital part of who he was. He knew that there would be more opportunities, more challenges, and more moments where he would need to summon his courage. But he also knew that he could face them, that he had the strength and skill to embrace his true potential. And so, As the restaurant quieted for the night and the last guests departed, the waiter stood by the piano once more. He looked at the keys, not with fear or hesitation, but with anticipation. The music had returned to him, and with it, a renewed sense of purpose. He was ready to embrace it fully, to explore the depth of his talent, and to allow himself to be seen. Not just as a waiter, but as a musician, an artist, and a person who had finally confronted the part of himself he had long avoided. The evening had settled over the city, casting long shadows and soft light across the streets. Inside the restaurant, the quiet anticipation of the guests was palpable. Word had spread that something unusual was about to happen, and curiosity filled the air. The waiter had returned to his duties earlier that day with a renewed sense of purpose, but nobody could have anticipated what would follow. The millionaire, who had been observing the waiter for weeks, leaned slightly forward in his seat, watching intently. He knew that this moment could be transformative, not just for the waiter, but for everyone present. He had seen glimpses of his talent before, but tonight was different. Tonight, the circumstances demanded more. The piano in the corner, polished and waiting, seemed to beckon with an almost magnetic pull. The waiter approached it with quiet determination. Each step was careful, deliberate. The staff and a few curious guests noticed the subtle change in his demeanor. His eyes were focused, his breathing steady, and there was a calm resolve in his expression. He placed his fingers lightly on the keys, pausing for a brief moment to absorb the silence of the room. The tension was thick, but it was accompanied by a sense of expectancy that electrified the atmosphere. Then he began. The first notes were soft, tentative, almost whispering across the room. They carried a fragility that hinted at years of hesitation and restraint, but also an underlying strength that could not be denied. The guests leaned forward, sensing the depth and emotion hidden in every delicate sound. Conversations had stopped. Even the regular diners who came for casual meals were spellbound. With each passing moment, the music grew in confidence and clarity. His hands moved fluidly over the keys, guided by a memory and skill that had never truly faded. The initial hesitancy was replaced by a powerful expression of artistry. Each chord told a story, rich with emotion, drawing everyone into an experience that was more than just music. It was an awakening. The millionaire watched in awe. He had never seen such transformation, not in a concert hall or in private recitals. The waiter's performance was not just technically impressive. It was filled with life, feeling, and authenticity. The raw emotion conveyed through each note revealed a story of struggle, perseverance, and rediscovery. It was a glimpse into the soul of a man who had lived quietly, hidden his talent, and finally dared to embrace it again. The guests, too, were captivated. Some gasped softly at the beauty of a particularly delicate passage. Others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them and evoke memories of their own. A sense of awe spread through the room, as though everyone had been transported to a place where only the music existed. It was impossible not to be moved by the intensity and sincerity of the performance as the music continued. The waiter's body language revealed more than the sounds themselves. He leaned into the piano, his posture expressing both vulnerability and strength. His eyes were sometimes closed, allowing the melody to flow naturally, unfiltered by self-consciousness. The room was filled with an almost tangible energy, as if every note resonated not just in the ears of the listeners but in their hearts. The performance was dynamic. There were moments of delicate, quiet reflection, where the notes seemed to hover and tremble, almost suspended in the air. Then came passages of bold, confident expression, where the pianist's fingers flew across the keys with precision and intensity. It was a journey through emotion, a narrative told without words, but understood by every listener in the room. The millionaire's friends, initially skeptical, were utterly enthralled. They exchanged glances, unable to believe that someone they had seen serving tables, someone who had seemed so ordinary, could create such extraordinary music. Each of them felt the story behind the notes, the hidden life and experiences that had shaped this performance. They realized that this was not just a demonstration of skill. It was the unveiling of a human spirit that had long been waiting for its chance to be seen. For the waiter, the music was transformative. Every note released years of tension, suppressed feelings, and hidden dreams. He could feel the joy, the sorrow, and the resilience of his own life reflected in the melodies. It was as if the piano had become an extension of his own being, allowing him to communicate emotions he had never dared to express before. The fear that had gripped him weeks earlier was replaced by a sense of liberation and purpose. As the final chords approached, the intensity of the music reached a crescendo. The room seemed to hold its collective breath, anticipating the culmination of this extraordinary moment. The waiter's fingers moved with incredible speed and accuracy, each key struck with intention and emotion. The final notes resonated powerfully, filling the space with a lasting echo that lingered even after the music had stopped. There was a moment of absolute silence. The room was suspended in awe, as if everyone was collectively absorbing the magnitude of what had just occurred. Then, slowly, applause erupted, growing louder with each passing second. The sound was thunderous, echoing off the walls and reaching every corner of the restaurant. Guests stood, some with tears in their eyes, acknowledging the sheer brilliance of what they had just witnessed. The waiter, breathing heavily but smiling, allowed himself a moment to take in the reaction. He felt a mixture of relief, pride, and exhilaration. He had faced the fear that had held him back for so long and had emerged victorious. The music had become a bridge, reconnecting him with his passion, his identity, and a sense of self he thought he had lost. It was a moment of personal triumph, but also one that touched everyone present. The millionaire approached quietly, placing a hand on the waiter's shoulder. "I knew you could do it," he said sincerely. "That was more than I could have imagined." The waiter nodded, humbled by the praise but also aware that the experience had been about more than recognition. It had been about reclaiming a part of himself, proving that talent and courage could overcome fear and doubt. Guests lingered for a while, many coming forward to express their admiration and gratitude. Some spoke of how the music had touched them personally, reminding them of forgotten dreams or unspoken emotions. Others simply thanked him for sharing a gift that was extraordinary in both its beauty and authenticity. The waiter accepted their words quietly, feeling a deep sense of connection and fulfillment that he had not known for years. As the evening drew to a close, the atmosphere in the restaurant had transformed completely. What had begun as a simple night of dining had become an unforgettable experience. The waiter, who had once blended into the background, had emerged as the center of attention, not through showmanship or bravado, but through the quiet, profound power of his talent and emotion. He returned to his station, but something had changed inside him. The fear that had once defined his relationship with music had been replaced by confidence and a renewed sense of purpose. He had faced the challenge he had long avoided and had discovered that his talent, his passion, and his courage were all still very much alive. The millionaire watched with satisfaction. He had recognized potential when others had overlooked it and had gently encouraged it to bloom. He knew that this night had not only changed the waiter's life, but had also inspired everyone who had witnessed it. The performance had reminded people of the beauty of hidden talent, the strength of facing fears, and the joy of rediscovering what makes life meaningful. For the waiter, the experience was transformative. He realized that he could no longer hide from his own abilities or fear the judgment of others. Music was a part of him and he had finally embraced it fully. He had found his voice again, not just in the notes he played, but in the confidence, courage, and authenticity that he now carried forward. As the last guests departed, the waiter lingered near the piano, gently placing his hands on the keys once more. He let his fingers rest lightly, feeling the resonance of the instrument beneath them. The music had returned to him, stronger and more vibrant than ever, and he knew that this was only the beginning of a journey that would take him to places he had once only dreamed of. The night had revealed his hidden brilliance to the world, and more importantly, to himself, leaving everyone who witnessed it truly stunned. The night had ended, but the energy from the performance lingered in the restaurant. The guests had gone home, many still talking about the incredible display of talent they had witnessed. The applause, the astonishment, and the emotional resonance of the music left a mark that would not soon be forgotten. But for the waiter, the impact was even deeper. He had faced a fear that had controlled him for years, and in doing so, he had uncovered a part of himself that had been dormant for far too long. As he returned to his station to finish the last few tasks of the night, he felt a quiet satisfaction settle over him. The adrenaline from performing had begun to fade, leaving a calm sense of achievement. He carefully wiped down tables, arranged chairs, and stacked dishes, but each movement felt lighter, freer. He was aware that something inside him had shifted forever. The millionaire, who had watched the entire performance from the corner of the room, approached once more. He had been both a witness and a gentle instigator, encouraging the waiter to confront what he had long avoided. "You were magnificent tonight," he said quietly. "I hope you understand that this is only the beginning. Your talent is extraordinary, and it deserves to be shared." The waiter nodded, humbled by the praise. He had always feared recognition, worried that his abilities might be misunderstood or that expectations would overwhelm him. Yet, standing there, he realized that sharing his gift did not have to be frightening. It could be liberating. The music had been a part of him, waiting for the right moment to return, and that moment had arrived. Word of the performance began to spread. The guests who had attended shared their experiences with friends and family, some posting about it on social media, others simply talking about it in person. Within a few days, the story of the quiet waiter who had stunned everyone with his piano skills reached far beyond the restaurant walls. People were captivated by the idea that such a humble, reserved individual could possess such talent. The attention was overwhelming at first. The waiter felt a mixture of pride and anxiety as new faces appeared in the restaurant, hoping to witness the magic themselves. He struggled initially with the realization that his life was about to change, that his talent could no longer remain a secret. Yet, the memory of the performance, the joy he had felt while playing, and the encouragement he had received gave him strength. He knew he could face this new reality. In the weeks that followed, opportunities began to emerge. Small invitations to perform at private gatherings, local events, and even some recording offers found their way to him. Each one was carefully considered, and while he remained humble, he began to recognize the possibilities that had been closed to him for so long. He had rediscovered not only his passion but also a confidence in himself that had been missing for years. One afternoon, as he prepared the restaurant for another evening of service, he paused near the piano. The polished keys reflected the soft lighting, and he ran his fingers lightly over them. The memory of that night, the fear, the hesitation, and ultimately the triumph, washed over him. He realized that he had grown not just as a musician but as a person. The courage it took to face his fear and the reward that followed taught him a lesson he would carry for the rest of his life. Sometimes, the greatest growth comes from confronting what we most fear. The millionaire returned once more, visiting the restaurant during a quiet evening. He found the waiter polishing silverware, his movements methodical yet calm. "I hope you've seen what your talent can do," he said with a smile. "Not just for others, but for yourself. The world is better when you share what you have." The waiter paused, reflecting on the words. He had come to understand that the music was not just a skill but an extension of himself, a means of expression and connection. The applause and recognition were meaningful, but the true reward was the sense of fulfillment and identity he had reclaimed. He realized that hiding his talent had not protected him, it had limited him. Facing it, embracing it, had freed him in a way he had never imagined. From that point forward, his life began to take on a new rhythm. Each day, he continued his work at the restaurant, but he also carved out time to play the piano, to practice, and to explore the depth of his talent. The music became a constant companion, a source of joy and purpose. Guests who returned to the restaurant were often treated to impromptu performances, and each one was met with wonder and appreciation. He began to notice changes in himself beyond his musical skill. He spoke more confidently, smiled more freely, and interacted with guests and colleagues with a new sense of ease. The quiet man who had once shied away from attention now embraced it when it was warranted, not for vanity, but as a natural result of recognizing his own worth. He understood that sharing his gift did not diminish him. It enriched both himself and those around him. Over time, invitations continued to grow. Local venues, small concert halls, and private events began to reach out, offering opportunities to perform. Each invitation was a choice, and he approached them thoughtfully. The fear that had once been a barrier remained as a faint echo, but it was now accompanied by excitement and anticipation. He knew he had the ability to face any stage, any audience, because he had already confronted the most important challenge: accepting himself. The millionaire watched from the sidelines as the transformation unfolded. He had recognized the waiter's potential early on, but the journey had been about more than talent. It had been about courage, self-discovery, and the willingness to embrace what life offered. The performance that had left everyone stunned was just the beginning of a story that was still being written, a story that belonged to the waiter and the music he had so long kept hidden. One quiet evening, after the restaurant had closed and the city's lights glimmered outside, the waiter sat at the piano alone. He played softly, allowing the melodies to flow naturally, unforced and unobserved. The music filled the room, and for the first time in years he felt complete. There were no expectations, no audience, just him and the piano, communicating in a language that transcended words. It was a reminder that while recognition and applause were fleeting, the true value of his talent lay in the joy it brought and the person it helped him become. In that moment, he reflected on the journey that had led him here. The years of quiet work, the fear of exposure, the unexpected push from the millionaire, and the courage it had taken to step into the light. Every challenge, every hesitation, had shaped him, and every note he played now carried the weight and beauty of that experience. He understood that life had a way of guiding people to moments that demanded their full presence, moments that could transform fear into growth and hidden potential into brilliance. And so, the waiter continued to play, each note a celebration of what he had reclaimed. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a companion, a storyteller, and a bridge to the future. The journey was ongoing, but he faced it with newfound confidence and a deep appreciation for the gift he had been given and the courage he had found within himself. The music, the recognition, and the opportunities that followed were wonderful, but the true transformation was the rediscovery of his own identity, the acceptance of his talent, and the joy of living fully in the gift he had been entrusted to share with the world.